Hi everyone, welcome to our second live tasting. I'm going to wait for a little bit for more people to get in. People running a little bit late. Time zone differences always mess with people. So people from Melbourne and Sydney may have been here half an hour ago and thought we've got because we're half an hour back. It's like 10:30 now, I think, in Melbourne and Sydney. Today we're going to be tasting through our art series of the Vinhal coffees. So these are the three different really interesting fermentation coffees from Rafael Vinhal and his family. I'm going to bend the camera down to show the bags. That worked perfect. So we're going to be tasting through the lot 15, lot 45, and lot 48. While we're waiting for more people to get here and for people watching this video after the fact. I think quite a few of you will be watching this not live, but after we've done it. A bit of information on each of those coffees. So now I've tilted my screen, it's really hard for me to read. But so the lot 15, I'm going to go over the fermentation. So all of these coffees are from the Cerrado Mineiro, I'm going to pronounce that badly, sorry, region in Brazil. 980 meters above sea level, different varietals as well, different varieties. So the peaberry, this lot 15 is a peaberry Icatu. And then if I just scroll down to the fermentation, after being, so all these coffees were mechanically harvested and then sorted, washed, selected for only the ripest cherries. This underwent a dry aerobic fermentation for 30 hours. After which it was then subject to a thermal shock. The cherries were then depulped, so it had a fermentation before depulping, even though this is the washed lot. They were then depulped after going, and then went under a second fermentation, this time submerged anaerobic for 190 hours. Right, so that's the washed lot. For the lot 45, the natural lot. This one is peaberry Katu Kai 2SL, which I'm not sure what that designation means, but I'm sure it's important. So then after picking and sorting for this one, it underwent a dry aerobic fermentation for 33 hours, then went through a thermal shock stage again. Underwent a second fermentation, this time a dry, so non-submerged anaerobic fermentation for 108 hours, and then went through a second thermal shock stage. Because this is natural, no depulping of any sort, it was then dried. And then out of the cherry at the dry milling stage. And then lot 48 is a honey processed. This one is Cachuai 99. Processing for this one, after being picked and sorted, it underwent a dry aerobic fermentation for 46 hours, after which it was subject to a thermal shock stage. So you can see that going across all of them. Underwent a second fermentation, again, a dry anaerobic one. So to this one for 190 hours. And underwent a second thermal shock stage. Only then was the coffee depulped before undergoing a third fermentation, this time anaerobic, with 100% of the mucilage remaining. So mucilage is like the sticky fruit left on the seeds after the kind of outer layer has been depulped. And that last fermentation was for 72 hours and then dried. So yeah, some really interesting fermentation going on with these coffees, which is bringing a lot of the interesting characteristics. I almost argue most, but of the interesting characteristics for these coffees. So everyone got. I'm going to put the camera back up, but I'll kind of pull the bags up as I'm talking about them if I think to. I'm just going to flip these around. I'm just going to check it doesn't look like anyone's in the chat here. So if anyone's watching the YouTube video, either live or after the fact, then actually most of what we're going to be doing is in the Cupwise platform. So you should be seeing that video. Yep. So the video is coming up, streams working correctly in the Cupwise platform this time. It didn't last time. Got it working this time. So if you're watching this on YouTube, then you want to go to Cupwise if you're interested in entering in your own tasting notes or seeing what scores other people gave. So Cupwise has this video. It has a chat where we can talk about the coffees, and then down the bottom it also has all of our basically our cupping form, and I'll go over how to use that. I'll go over how to cup as well. So if you're looking for all those things, then it's not on YouTube. YouTube's just hosting the video. It's on the Cupwise platform. I'm just going to copy and paste that link into the chat here now. And I should, if I know what I'm doing, be able to have the chat live replay. So if you're watching this after the fact, that'll come up as I've just said it. So that link will take you to Cupwise. I'm going to jump across onto my screen for Cupwise. So if people are throwing stuff into the chat here, I probably won't see it unless I think to go back and forth between them. So yeah, I don't think we've got too many people in yet. If people have already started cupping them, then feel free to start entering your scores down below if you know what you're doing. I've already unlocked the scoring, so that's available to be entered. I'm just going to run through quickly for those that haven't done a cupping before or aren't familiar with Cupwise, what a cupping is, how we're going to do it. I'll kind of talk through it as well, and how to use Cupwise, what the score sheet down the bottom is kind of all about. I think the most fun bit for everyone is probably going to be entering the descriptors, particularly for these coffees, because these are very interesting, not particularly subtle in a good way, coffees. So I'm going to go back into YouTube because Cupwise has a little bit of a delay and it's messing with me. So cupping is basically just our industry standard way of tasting coffee, performing quality control in the coffee. And the key thing there is that it's industry standard. So the idea is we're doing everything the same way, all of us, whether it might be the farmer, exporter, importer, roaster, or you at home. There's still going to be some variables, which mean we'll taste slightly different things. Our grinders will be different. Our water will probably be different. The idea is we're trying to remove as many variables as possible, other than the coffee itself. And so to that extent, cupping is also a very simple way to extract, very simple way to brew coffee, with the idea being that the extraction itself isn't introducing a variable for us that's kind of throwing off what we're tasting. Basically, it's going to be making a French press or a plunger, but without the actual plunger bit. So I don't know if you can see when I load my screen, but I've got my beans already in my cup. I've weighed these out. If anyone's curious, I've used 65 grams per liter, or 13.6 grams of coffee for these cups, which I'll be putting 210 mils of water in. Ordinarily, you'd be doing 60 grams per liter, but the grinder that I've got at home, the burr set I've got in that, is producing quite a lot of fines. And so I've been deliberately going a bit coarser, under extracting the coffee a little bit. We'll try to not extract those fines too much because they make the cup a bit muddy in flavor. And as a result, I've up-dosed a little bit to compensate. So 65 grams instead of 60. So I've got my coffee already weighed out. We're then going to grind all that coffee. That's the first stage. We're going to assess our coffees. We're going to smell them, smell that fragrance of the ground coffee, which we call the dry fragrance, and make some notes then, get an initial idea of the coffee. That's particularly useful for taste descriptors. Obviously, you can't get a lot in terms of body, acidity, sweetness as of yet. You're not tasting the coffee. That's our first stage that we assess the coffee. Then we'll boil our water, pour boiling water over them. I highly recommend using, you can't really do this without using scales for every stage, including pouring the boiling water, because different coffees will have different levels of kind of foam at the top crust, and thus you'd have different volumes potentially if you weren't using scales. And that could lead to an extraction difference. Thus, you're tasting the extraction difference and not the difference in the coffee. So we're going to brew our kettle, pour boiling water over them, and start a timer. Then we're going to assess the coffee our second time. Again, just smelling it at this stage. But after you pour boiling water on the grounds, you're going to change the smell quite a lot. There'll be new things that come to light. Things will change a little bit because a lot of the aroma compounds in coffee are water soluble. So until they encounter water, they're not going to be released. So assess them a second time. Again, just the fragrance, make some more notes. Then we'll break the crust that forms, and finally then start tasting the coffee. And that's when we start to work out things like acidity, sweetness, etc., and finalize our scores and fine tune those taste descriptors, which we may have already kind of built up from smelling the coffee a couple of times before that. So that's the process of cupping. I'll run you through it as I'm doing it. Again, today I'm doing 13.6 grams of coffee and 210 mils of water. Usually you do 60 grams per liter. In terms of grind size, I'll try and demonstrate that when I get to that. But realistically, it's going to depend a lot on your grinder and I guess your taste preference as well and your water. If anyone's curious about water, today I'm using my Peak water filter, and I've got it dialed in to be about 75 ppm of, or milligrams per liter of general hardness, and 25 of carbonate hardness, which is relatively soft for carbonate hardness and relatively high for, well, for me, relatively high for general hardness. I'd ideally bring those back to like 1 to 2, general hardness being 2 of whatever I've got carbonate hardness. But because I'm using the Peak filter, I'm getting whatever I get out of my tap, and that's the ratio that it has to work with. So again, I've gone a little bit lower on the carbonate hardness. 25 is pretty low for carbonate hardness because my burst set and my grinder producing quite a lot of fines, and so I'm going soft on the carbonate hardness, try and bump up the acidity a little bit. So if that all went over your head, don't worry about it yet. That's like the pinnacle of coffee geekery, water. But if anyone watching this is into their water geekery, then that's what I'm using for frame of reference. Grind size, easiest thing is going to be to dial it in by taste. If you find when you're brewing coffee that it's a little bit astringent and bitter, you probably grind a little bit too fine. Potentially also if the coffee is not either of those two things, but very bland, and the coffee shouldn't be bland, especially if you've got a lot of aroma on the dry grounds, but then when you brew it, it ends up being quite bland on your palate, tasting it, then that's probably a little bit too fine. Too coarse is probably just that the coffee's quite weak, watery, sour. So generally I'd go as fine as I can until I hit that kind of limit of sweetness being reduced, some astringency coming through, maybe some blandness being predominant. Then I'll go one click coarser, bring it back a little bit. It's usually how I dial in. Size is not super useful for us. So that's cupping, which we'll get into soon. Oh, cool. Okay, we have some people now. Okay, I'm going to read out comments because I'm not sure how well they'll come up afterwards, after we've finished this and saved it. Lot 15 being smelled pungently of pandan. That's brilliant. Excellent. Pandan was one of our tasting notes. And I was actually on the fence about putting pandan on there because in Australia, I don't know how many people eat pandan. My household, we love pandan. We eat it a lot. But I'm not sure if that's common or not. So it's a really, if you haven't had pandan before and you're going, oh, what's this pandan thing that's meant to be in this coffee? Go to an Asian grocery store, get some. It's amazing to cook with. It has such a unique kind of floral, grassy, coconutty kind of flavor. It's fantastic, quite unique. Ash, I'm not cupping, just saying hi and seeing what's going on while I can. Hi, Ash. I'm guessing you've got kids to deal with. I've got my wife Celeste is taking care of him at the moment. I've got a 10-week-old at home. So if you hear a screaming baby, that's what that is. Cool. So that's cupping. We'll get into it in a second. I'll just quickly go over, we're back into Cupwise now. I'm going to go over how to use the cupping form, the kind of electronic cupping form down the bottom. So those messages I'm just reading out, they're on the Cupwise. If you're on YouTube, again, and you're going, where were those messages he was reading out? They're on Cupwise. I'm going to try and get everyone onto that chat and onto the YouTube chat. So they're on the right-hand side. If you've got any thoughts, thank you for those that already have. If you've got any thoughts at all, just throw them in. That's the whole point of the chat. This isn't meant to be like me talking at you, although obviously the medium kind of lends itself to that. The idea is we kind of talk about the coffees. People are going to have some differing opinions. That's really exciting. And it doesn't have to be positive things. If you don't like something about it, please, this is meant to be an honest assessment of these coffees, of our roasting, of everything. So even if they're negative things, throw it in there. Let's talk about it. Asian vanilla. Yeah, so pandan being Asian vanilla. I'd agree with that. Yeah. Cool. So down the bottom, we've got the 3 coffees. If you scroll down a little bit past the video in the chat, we've got the 3 coffees laid out. Lot 15, lot 45, lot 48, from left to right. And then we have some scores in there. And then down the bottom, we have descriptors. There's 2 sections for descriptors, just skipping ahead. Group descriptors, where everyone's descriptors will appear. And then my descriptors, where you enter your own descriptors. So I'm actually going to put in for the lot 15, pandan, because I get that too. So I'm going to type in pandan. And pushing enter doesn't work from memory. Do I have to go space? Yes. So type in your tasting note and then push space and then it'll appear. So I don't know how live it is for you guys, but you should see a really massive pandan appearing in the group descriptors. Those, it's a word cloud, so those will change, get bigger or smaller based on how many people use the same word. So if you're putting in a descriptor, so that works a bit better. If you're putting in a descriptor which is very similar to someone else's descriptor, then maybe you word it the same way, because then the algorithm will, the coding will grab it and make that, not add another word which is very similar, but make that one word bigger. So then we can see at the end of it what is kind of standing out the most in the coffees, and then what's a little bit more subdued. Worked really well with our last live tasting that we did with the Koji coffees. It was kind of cool seeing like what were the biggest ones and then what were a bit smaller. Going into the scores, that's relatively easy. You just click where you want to put those scores. The scoring for cupping only really works well if you're calibrated with one another. You know, your 8 is very similar to my 8, so on and so forth. Obviously, we're not going to be calibrated, so the score is going to be a little bit, but it might be interesting for everyone. So I've also got group scoring put on there, average scores. So you can put your score in. You'll also see what the average score for other people is. So if you've not cupped before, then that average score might be really handy for you to get an idea of what other people's 8 is, what other people's 9 is, that sort of thing. So the average score, useful for me, looking at the end of it, to assess these coffees, assess our roasts, but also for you, if you haven't cupped very much, then it might be interesting to see where you sit compared to everyone else. And if you see in the chat that everyone's like, wow, I really love that coffee, and they're putting, you know, aroma scores of 8.75, and you go, I really love that coffee, then maybe you know that should be maybe an 8.75. Maybe an 8.5. Aroma is pretty, and obviously these scores, but their preferences, how much we like it. So how nice is the aroma? How nice is the acidity? You could argue that this acidity should be how much acidity is there, but I would want to be using this as what's the quality of the acidity? How well balanced is it in the structure of the rest of the coffee? Sweetness, the more the better. Balance, that's a very personal one. Everyone's kind of preferences there, but how well balanced is the coffee between like sweetness, acidity, aromas, bitterness, if there is any. Ideally there wouldn't be, but balance is a bit, it's not as easy to describe, and you kind of know it when you feel it. Coffee is not hollow and sour, but it's crunchy and juicy, you know, be well balanced, and that would also be a better score for the acidity. You can see these are all quite related to one another. Clarity, so you're going to be looking there for, I mean, I don't know if it's meant to be in the scoring. I'd say you wouldn't want roast defects. If there are roast defects in there, that would reduce the clarity of the coffee. I'm going to be referring to that as like clarity of the origin character of the coffee. But then also the origin character itself might need some work with clarity. So maybe the coffee is a little bit earthy, or a little bit muddy in flavor. The flavor descriptors aren't very clear and concise and easy to pick out. They're a little bit muddled, so that'd be lower clarity. And then mouthfeel is pretty self-explanatory. Again, we're talking about quality. These are all very light roasts. These are our light roast profile, and we roast quite light. So they're going to be very light in the mouth, but I'd say quality of the mouthfeel as opposed to the weight of the mouthfeel. You click and drag that slider to wherever you think it should be, and you're done. So that's all pretty self-explanatory. That's not a test for you guys or anything. It's meant to just be fun. So if you've not cupped before and you're a little bit nervous about using the cupping sheet, then don't be. Just have a bit of fun with it. Work off the average scores, perhaps, if that helps you, and try and calibrate. The most interesting one, the easiest one, the most fun one is probably going to be adding group descriptors. So if you have thoughts, you know, think, oh, the 45 has this nice strawberry thing going on, throw it in. Down to the very bottom, add a descriptor. I found last time people were throwing a lot of descriptors into the chat and not putting them down into the bottom, which means the word cloud is really boring. Looks like we're not going to get, maybe it's not a very good time for people. We're not going to get that many people now. It's already 10:20, so I'm going to start cupping, which is hopefully fun for people watching this after the fact. Last time we got a few people live. I think there was maybe like a dozen of us or something. And then afterwards, we had heaps of people watch the video afterwards. So I guess everyone's schedule was a little bit different, which is fair enough. So I'm going to talk through what I'm doing a little bit. I'm using a fellow Ode, if anyone's curious, and I'm using their version 2 burr set. So I'm going to grind all my coffees and then boil my kettle and start making some notes. So I'm actually, because the Ode is very staticky, you're actually going to see me like produce a lot of static electricity. You're going to see me use a little squirty thing, water squirty spritzer thing, to spritz just a little bit of water onto my beans to help reduce the static as the coffee's grinding. Otherwise, there's a lot of retention, chaff goes everywhere. It's all a bit of a mess. So also the grinder will be loud. I apologize for that. Sorry, this was really boring. If I was clever with YouTube, I'd like play some music or do one of those like clever things that people do with smash cuts, but I'm not. I'm a coffee roaster. Sorry. And if everyone's curious what I'm doing here, I'm just getting the water over everything. Not some weird grinding dance you have to do. And that tapping sound is me knocking the lid up and down on the ode. If anyone has an ode, the water and the lid knocking are all very useful to get any retention out of the grinder. So just kind of forcing a bit of air through, a bit like a bellows, but not as effective to get any retention out there. I find it works really well when I take this apart to clean it, because I'm doing the water and I think the tapping thing. When I take this apart to clean it, there's almost zero retention inside it, which is handy. If anyone is watching this after the fact, like not live after it's been recorded, and a couple of beans that got stuck in the glass. Downside of the water, but worth it. If anyone's watching this after the fact, and you wish you could have been live, but Saturdays at 10 a.m. are really inconvenient for you, I don't know what's convenient for people or not. So feel free to throw in the comments on YouTube. I might not come back to make things extra complicated. I might not come back to Cupwise to check comments and stuff afterwards. I might check the YouTube every now and then, or just send us a DM on social media or something like that. If there's a better time that works for people, I'm basically going to take the average. If there's a time a day of the week that works better for most people, that's when I'll do these live tastings. But seeing as I don't know when that is for people, make sure there's no beans stuck in the bottom. I'm just going to do Saturday mid-morning because I figured that's maybe convenient unless people have sport. Not very sporty. Don't do sport. So we've got all of our coffee ground. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see it on the camera. Maybe I'll bring this down, get some of my hand in terms of my grind size. Again, it's going to depend a lot on your grinder. At home, you can see this is relatively coarse. This is a lot coarser visually than what I would ordinarily do for cupping. If I was on an EK43, like at the roaster or something like that, it'd be much finer. That's because I find this burr set, the version 2 burr set, the ode is still producing it. It's kind of this, for me, heavy fines, slightly muddy cup profile, not a lot of clarity, more body and more forgiveness in the dialing, but in exchange for clarity. So I'm going quite a bit coarser and updosing a little bit just to make this work. So now we've got our ground coffee. It's our first stage for assessing it. You'll see me tap the glass and smell it. Tapping is just to release the volatile aromas. Ando. Sunday generally works better for me. Luckily, I'm injured, so I can't attend my training today. Training, see? Sport. Knew I should have done Sunday. Thank you. Good to know. I might do them in Sundays in future, but then some people have church on Sunday mornings. So sport on Saturday, church on Sunday. I don't know, probably more people playing sport than going to church these days. So we might do Sundays. But yeah, I was worried about so and Saturday mornings is kids sport for school, isn't it? But it's school holidays at the moment. So anyway, back to the cupping. So again, don't stress too much about the cupping sheet, the scores. Now these you can change. You can put your score in and change it. So ordinarily that might be a little bit fiddly to do, like on a physical cupping form. Not that bad. You scribble it out, but here it's nice and easy. So I'd actually put my aroma score in now, and then I might adjust that aroma score after I've started brewing the coffee and tasting it. And so I'm going to give it a bit of a tap to kind of release more of the volatiles, and then have a really good sniff. And then you want to be going with the things that jump to mind most obviously. So if there's something that's kind of on the tip of your tongue, can't get it, don't keep sniffing, keep going back to it, because it will just like run away from you. It'll be harder and harder to notice it. So give it a sniff, go kind of free association, stuff that comes up first. Now I'm going to talk about what I'm smelling. If you were in a cupping with other people, usually you wouldn't. You'd keep it to yourself because you don't want to bias each other. But I feel like maybe a lot of people watching this video afterwards on YouTube might be wanting to know what I get in these coffees to calibrate. What should they be getting in their coffees? Oh, also, we will get different things, not just because everyone has different tastes and different experiences, but also because they're different roast levels. Last time we did this, sorry, not different roast levels, different roast dates. Last time we did this with the Koji coffee, it was all roasted on the same day. Everyone had the same coffee. This one, because I wasn't sure if we were going to do it, because I knew I was having a kid and I don't have time. Thankfully, my wife is lovely and able to take our son this morning. And he's actually been very quiet, so he must be happy. That's good. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do this, so we didn't kind of structure it that way. We just have these coffees up for a while. So if anyone's curious, my roast date for the I'm going to go back to YouTube so I can see this in lifetime. For the 15 is the 5th of December. My roast date for the 45 is the 24th of November. My roast date for the 48 is the 14th of December. So ideally, we use Cropster, and ideally there wouldn't be big variations based on roast date. But we have actually changed these profiles a little bit. So there's been some deliberate changes. So if you're getting different kind of notes and scores to other people, then that might be the reason why. It's going to be partly because everyone has different experiences and partly because slightly different roast dates. So yeah, and also you might notice that a lot of these coffees my coffees that I've got are like quite old now. It's like 5th of December, what's that one? 24th of November, and that's perfectly fine. A lot of people in this might know that already, but some of you might be new to this bit, kind of been taught to have coffee really fresh. But light roasts in particular, if they've been stored well, you can have them months after the fact. And actually, our coffees, because they're such a light roast, tend to improve after 2 weeks, and sometimes not even to a month do they really kind of hit their peak because they're such a light roast. So yeah, you might notice the roast dates have been quite old. That's perfectly okay. In fact, might be a good thing. And I took them out of the freezer, so I was worried that they wouldn't be. They wouldn't be rested enough. Yeah. For our coffee, more resting the better. Resting just being waiting between when they're roasted and when you brew them. So anyway, let's get to the aromas before they all volatilize off. And again, if you're doing this right now with me, then please throw your notes into the bottom. Otherwise, the word cloud is just going to be me and my notes. So doing the 15. Pandan, I'm leaving Pandan there. It's quite obvious for me. Another not very subtle one in a really fun way is coconut. So coconut really stands out for me in this coffee. And then when it's really fresh, I think the coconut kind of dominates. But I'm getting a lot of hazelnut in this one, which I didn't put on the bag. I was tossing up. I'm going to put hazelnut. Oops, I spelled hazelnut wrong. So I'm going to you can delete your tasting notes as well. There's like a little X next to them. Hazelnut. So we almost put hazelnut on the bag for that one, but it wasn't that obvious because we usually QC coffee cup it like right after it's like a couple of days after it's roasted. I find the hazelnut in this doesn't really come out until it's had about a month resting, something like that. And then I'm probably going to put an 8 for the aroma score on that one for me. It could be higher, but this particular roast, this is one of the profiles that we deliberately changed. This particular roast, after I got it and QC'd it, we decided to change a little bit. It was probably a little bit quick, a little bit aggressive with the gas, and so for me, it's just got this slight harshness on it, which might remind me of like if you did a piece of toast and just the edges of it are just a little bit burnt. So you still eat the piece of toast and you still enjoy it. It's not like the whole piece is burnt. It's not smoky, but it's just this slight kind of burnt toast edge to the aroma, which is reducing the enjoyment for me. And so that was because it was just a little bit too quick for that coffee, the roast. So we changed that profile. So hopefully some of you have got the profiles which don't have that kind of edge to it, because we went a little bit gentler on further roasts. So now doing the 45. Okay, so for me, there's a lot of strawberry, and I'm just throwing them in, and a lot of butter, The butter, for some of you, might be a good thing or a bad thing. It might be like weirdly buttery, borderline cheesy for some people. That's coming from the fermentation. For me, I quite like it. It's like very buttery. Once again, it's got a little bit. Oh no, I was gonna say a little bit of that burnt toast edge. I don't think it's burnt toast. I think it's more like toasted nuts. And it's probably hazelnuts again for this coffee, but instead of just hazelnuts, I'm going to put toasted hazelnuts because again, there's just that like slight, heavy Maillard edge. They're not like fresh sweet hazelnuts. They're like a little bit toasted hazelnuts. But then there's also I laughed when I first smelt it because when you drink this coffee quite fresh, it's kind of like really pungent with the strawberries and the butter and not very funky. But now this has got some serious age on it. I'm actually getting a decent amount of funk on this. We're kind of moving away from funky coffees, like not buying them as much as roasters and not roasting them. But yeah, there is a bit of a funky kind of edge to it. I don't know what I want to put that down as a descriptor, which wasn't there when you cup it quite fresh, or at least in my bag there is. Your bag might be different. There's also a bit of a licorice thing. It's called licorice. I guess I spell licorice. If anyone agrees with that and I've spelled it badly, just use my bad spelling so the word cloud picks it up. There's a bit of a licorice thing. And the funkiness, like with funky coffees, they can be a little bit funky, might just be like overripe fruit. A bit more funky than that might be like winey. A bit more funky than that might be like people would say boozy and like very whiny. And then more funky than that, you're getting into the territory of like kimchi, Vegemite, savory kind of things. This is definitely not that for me, at least. It's definitely in the overripe fruit kind of boozy funk, but it's not boozy. It's not alcoholic. It is like overripe fruit. It's like a fruit bowl that's just like got some. I'm going to put overripe has 2 R's, right? Overripe fruit. Overripe fruit. Like a fruit bowl where you've had stuff in there a little bit too long. This is a bit nicer for me because of the fruit that's there. I'm going to go like an 8.3 for that to start with. Again, we can change our scores once we've done everything else. I guess if you're watching this, if you're in Cupwise, not in the live, but after the fact, you're going to see some scores in there. I'm going to try and do it so that the scoring stays open. So if you don't discover this for another month or, whatever, you should still be able to put your scores in, and I might check back on it every now and then. Okay, cool. No more comments. So let's go on to the 48. Now, the 48 is probably the one that stands out for the most people. And we sold out. We've already sold out of it, and we sold out of it well before the other ones. The reason being because the most obvious aroma in this is grape Hubba Bubba. It smells like grape bubble gum. It smells like Hubba Bubba you had as a kid. Like the number of people that have asked me, if this has anything added to it or anything like that to get that flavor. Rest assured from the producer, absolutely not. That's just from the fermentation. Remember, 3 fermentations, hundreds of hours, thermal shock processing. Who knows what's going to come out of it? And in this situation, what came out of it is Hubba Bubba. So I'm going to put Hubba Bubba, which I didn't put on the bag because I feel like that's a trademark issue. I'm also going to write grape bubble gum in case there's people outside of Australia that maybe Hubba Bubba is an Australian thing, or maybe our particular grape flavor is an Australian thing. I don't know. Grape bubble gum. So it's very confectionery, very not coffee. It's obviously coffee as well. Once again, I'm getting hazelnuts. It seems to be a thing. I really don't get that very strongly until I'm only noticing it now that coffees are got a couple of months on them, or at least a month. Definitely comes out more. So underneath the Hubba Bubba, I'm getting hazelnuts. Once again, they're a little bit toasted. This profile, we also went a little bit gentler after this bag I got. Toasted hazelnuts. So initially we put on the bag marzipan. I think that was a combination of the like slightly floral characteristics from the bubble gum and the nuts. I think that's separated out for me today. I'm not really getting marzipan. Maybe a little bit. Oh yeah, enough. Hopefully the word cloud works because obviously I just put everything in. They all get kind of the same size, but but hopefully the workaround works. And if there's not that many people getting marzipan, then it's quite small. Hubba Bubba is quite big. Yeah, bubblegum, bit of marzipan, hazelnuts. People, some people really don't like the bubblegum thing because it's like coffee and that's too candied. Personally, like I find it really interesting, but I definitely prefer like fresh fruits than I do like confectionery kind of flavors. This was at my Southland. These are all from Rafael Vinhal is the farmer. The importer in Australia is Southland Merchants, Andre and Nadia. They took this this coffee, the 48, to mice with them. And yeah, oh my god, I've got another bean in there. Okay, I have another bean. That's the risk with the water. I'm just going to grind things quickly. And then apparently someone, that seems really pedantic, but the weights, so I want to keep the weights accurate. So one of my tasted like eating like a whole handful of Halloween candy or something. Just very confectionery. Cool. So we've got our dry. And then score for that one. I'm probably going to put an 8.2 again. 8.2, 8.3. So we've got our notes in, our initial scores in. Now we're going to boil our kettles and start brewing these. I'm going to get my scales to do that. Along with my cups with coffee weight in them, my kind of mise en place for cupping is I've also got 2 other glasses. These are going to be for rinsing my spoons and putting the foam in when I'm skimming. And then I have another cup for some clean water and my 2 cupping spoons. So this is for rinsing my spoons in between cups when I'm tasting and when I'm cleaning. The reason I've got two different ones for rinsing is because this first one will get a little bit gross with bits of coffee in it and stuff, a bit of foam. So I like having a clean one after that, so I'm not transferring foam into my cups. Sorry, that noise is the kettle boiling. Hopefully you can hear me on top of it. I've also got a glass of water. So a lot of people talk about things to reset your palate. The only things that really work in my experience is having a sip of water and a time, taking a break, not for half an hour, but at least for like a minute or something, like 30 seconds. So yeah, I've got my scales ready to go for weighing out my water. I'm just going to start that soon. At the same time, I'm going to get my timer ready and start a 4-minute timer. If I know what button that is on my phone. Timer, 4 minutes. Cool. Timer all set up for 4 minutes. I might move the screen down because that might be more interesting than just watching my face stare as I'm doing it. So that was my kettle boiling. I always use water right off the boil. I wait for the kettle to click and then I wait for the rolling boil to stop. And then I'll use it straight away. Just because then that's one variable that's set. So our water to coffee ratio is set. Our water is set. All we're really changing when we're dialing in is our grind size. Just makes life much easier. Also, again, harkens back to the standardization of what we're doing when we cut. So my kettle's boiled. My timer went away. Timer, 4 minutes. I'm going to be aiming for as close as I can get to 210 mils. Start my timer. And then I'm pouring quite aggressively at the start. Pouring quite aggressively at the start, but the idea is you don't want any dry grounds sitting in the bottom. If you're too gentle with your pouring, you'll miss some of the coffee. So you can see I'm very aggressive at the start to get all that coffee wet, all that coffee agitated. Then I slow down at the end. Oops, that one was a little bit too much. Slow down at the end to avoid that at the end where you overfill them. Or just miss entirely. Sorry, this is very hard to do on this angle. I'm used to standing up when I cup. So I've made a little bit of a mess. Cool. I'm going to pour some water into one of my cups for rinsing. And I'm just going to do the other one now as well. It'll go a little bit cold, but that doesn't matter too much. If you were cupping in a group, you'd probably wait and do that. This has coffee all over it now. I don't have anything absorbed in here. Carefully move this. Yeah, that's right. It's just coffee. And slide this a little bit further forward. The glasses are hot now. So before we were picking them up to smell them, now you would lean in to smell them because they're very hot to touch and potentially have boiling water all over them because you made a mess like I have. So now we're going to store them again while we're waiting for that 4 minutes and see if we're making any changes to our notes or our score that we've put in so far. And again, if anyone has any questions or anything, throw them in. If you're live, if it's not live, I may see them, I may not. And you can get really close when you're smelling the coffee. Obviously, you might get your nose in it every now and then, but closer the better. Nothing's really changed, but I prefer it now. That's the 15. So I'm going to bump that up to it. That's an easy 8.5. The coconuts really come out. It's super sweet. I'm actually going to I'm just going to put cake in there because yeah, it's gotten this like cakey kind of quality, like pandan chiffon. That's why I put that as a tasting note. But anyway, 45. Oh yeah, that's gotten better too. So the fruit's gotten more complex, and now it's not just strawberry. It has this like blackberry thing going on. It's like this like deeper, darker kind of fruit, almost like I'm gonna say foresty. Like a forest. I don't know how to describe it better than that. Kind of pine has this pine quality, which I get in blackberries most of the time, and like it's gotten a lot jammier as well. So I'm gonna put jammy on that one. I'm gonna bump the score up on that too. Sometimes now this isn't always the case. Sometimes when you hit it with water, the score goes down. So that's probably already like an 8.6 or 8.7 for me. I'm really enjoying that. Yeah, the funkiness is toned down now, and it's just gotten a lot jammier. And the 48 is just more bubblegum. The other stuff is gone. It's just bubblegum. Um, which, if you like bubblegum or you find it interesting, I'm probably going to leave that score where it is. I think people are going to find that really interesting, but not really my cup of tea because it's just I don't really eat lollies and stuff. Like it's very confectionery. It just smells like bubblegum. It's just kind of nuts, which I guess is really interesting for people. So, I mean, hopefully that's really interesting for everyone. So now we're just waiting for our timer to finish, and then we're going to break. I'll bring the screen down again to show you how I break, or how I'm breaking at the moment. Breaking is just, you can see that crust that's on them. I'm going to bring the screen down now. That crust that's formed on them, there we go, that's our timer. So that's carbon dioxide and coffee grounds. Right now, those grounds aren't extracting with water because the carbon dioxide is stopping them. You can see this one has lost its crust. That's because I bumped it and I wasn't paying attention. So I'm going to take my spoons. We need to break that crust so that all the coffee can be interacting with the water. I'm going to take my spoon, and then there's two ways you could break. You could scoop down to the bottom, and that would agitate all of the coffee. And that's what I would usually do if I was using an EK43 or a better grinder. For this one, I'm just going to do the top. So I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3. Get all those grounds to sink. I'm just doing the top because I don't want to re-agitate the fines which have already sunk to the bottom because again, this burst set is producing for me quite a lot of fines. Now I'm still going to do the 45, this cup, even though the crust is already sunk, because I want the agitation to be the same between all of them. That's just about that consistency. So that coffee is already sunk, but I'm doing that anyway because it will agitate. You can't really see on the webcam, but you can see the water's moving through there and it will increase the extraction, that agitation. So 1, 2, 3. Also, if I wasn't trying to demonstrate for you guys what I was doing, I'd have my face in there giving it a really good sniff because the break is when you release a lot of the aromas of the coffee. I'm going to take my other glass. Now this bit takes a bit of practice. I do recommend if you're like a coffee geek and you're really into coffee, start cupping at home. Start like this, comparative cupping, where you're tasting multiple coffees. So you'll get better at this the more you do it, but it does take some practice. I'm going to take both spoons and run them around the lip of the cup and each other at the same time to remove that foam which is on top. Now at first it's really fiddly and awkward. That's okay. Like no one can do it well first time they do it. It just takes some practice. Just get rid of that foam. That's just because you don't want the foam in your mouth when you're tasting them. It's going to affect the taste. It's going to affect mostly the mouthfeel significantly, and it'll affect the acidity and sweetness as well, because that foam I find tends to be quite bitter. So you want to remove that foam so you're not getting it on your spoon as you taste the coffees. If anyone's curious about cupping spoons, these are the ones I'm using today. These are my new favorite cupping spoons. Got these from Upstream, from Kush. Thank you, Kush. These are lovely because cupping spoons have like a big bowl it's quite deep for getting a big sample. And then they're like relatively well balanced. Is I always like that. They're really nice to hold when they're well balanced. But these are quite light. A lot of cupping spoons are like big and chunky. These are awesome. I have to ask Kush where he got these from. Oh, I just realized. Oh my god, it says Adam on the back. Oh, Kush, that's lovely. Thank you. That's very special. I don't know that. It's not my favorite because it says Adam. I had only just noticed that. I just really like the weight of them. Using any like soup spoon will probably be fine at home if you're doing this at home. Dessert spoon is going to be annoying. Now, if you were at a public cupping these days, and you're probably doing a COVID-safe version of this, where you would take your spoon, transfer the coffee into a cup, and then drink from the cup, which is much more hygienic. I'm at home cupping by myself, so I don't need to worry about that. Now, in the COVID-safe, if you've done the COVID-safe ones, perhaps then you immediately after breaking and cleaning the cups, you guys start tasting. We can't do that, and we're not going to do that because the coffee is way too hot. When you transfer it into another glass, it'll cool it down quite a lot. But also, it's still extracting at this point. It's still changing. So while I think of it, one of my tips when you're cupping is do an initial, we call them passes, where you taste all the coffees, and then take a break. Think about your notes, whatever it might be. Come back again. And when we're cupping, we would do like at least 4 passes when we're cupping, where they're like initially when it's cool enough to cup, then another pass almost immediately afterwards, but in the other direction. Reason being, the coffee you've just tasted will impact the taste you get in the next coffee. And then go away, do some other stuff. We're at the roastery, we're quite busy. Come back after like 10 minutes when they're still lukewarm, see if anything's changed. And then go away, come back again after like an hour when they're stone cold, room temperature, and then taste them again. Because they'll change quite a lot. And actually, the testament to a good coffee is if it's still tasting good, particularly still tasting sweet, when you come back to it once it's room temperature. So we're going to wait a little bit for those to cool. I don't think we have many people here. I think it might just be you left, Ando. So I was going to say if anyone has any questions. Ando, do you have any questions? Anything you want to talk about? Yeah, Saturday morning, not a good time to do it. Everyone's out playing footy or tennis or something. Yeah, and only my notes in the word cloud at the moment. Hopefully, I come back to this in a few weeks when people have had a chance to do this and see some other notes other than mine. One of the ways to know if coffee is cool enough to start cupping is that you can say this glass had the hot coffee in it, is hold it, and once it's cool enough that you can just hold your hand on it, then it's fine. It's fine to start tasting. Both in terms of, I guess I should have mentioned as well, in terms of cooling, not only will the coffee change in flavor as it cools, but actually there will be chemical reactions going on other than simply an increase in extraction. So I think caffeic acid breaks down into quinic acid. There's a few things going on like that as the coffee sits there, and the temperature changes. But also the different temperature will change how you perceive things on your palate. So the thing to remember there is to just taste the coffee multiple times at multiple different temperatures. I'm just going to check my notes while I'm waiting for these to cool a little bit. Pandan, cake, hazelnut, coconut for lot 15. That's pretty on point. Overripe fruit. The overripe fruit definitely toned down in lot 45 once it got hit with the water. Actually, the butter toned down as well once it got hit with the water. Toasted hazelnuts, still there a little bit. Licorice is kind of combined with the blackberry a little bit. It's just giving this kind of, piney, herbaceous, foresty kind of dark berry thing. And the strawberry's still there. Jammy is very small because of the way the word cloud works. I wonder if I can put jammy twice. Does that affect it? Yes, it made the word cloud bigger. No, it made 2 jammies. Damn it. Did not work. Okay. Hopefully other people find it jammy and put their descriptors in so that gets bumped up a little because it's quite jammy. At least for me, it's quite jammy now. And the butter's toned down a lot. I guess that's the downside of the word cloud. 48, Hubba Bubba, Great Bubble Gum, Toasted Hazelnuts, Marzipan. Yep. And that is perfect that the Hubba Bubba and Great Bubble Gum are like massive. Because, that's definitely what stands out the most. And I've already used up my bag of 48, so I'll put down notes. I had, perfect. Yeah, that works perfectly fine. This is not like we're we're not going by the book with this cupping. This is meant to be fun. So notes you've written down from previous tastings, pour overs, espresso, whatever of the coffee, feel free to throw those in too. Is there any details on the Thermalshock 30-hour fermentation? Other than the bit I did at the start, or were you not in at the start, Ando? So I went through the Thermalshock. I'm guessing because you said 30 hours, you were in at the start. 30 hours dry, as in, and then if it was in a container or anything like that, I'm not sure. But, and maybe I should have said this sooner, I'm going to try and do a live IGT interview with Rafael, the producer. So that could be really fun. So the idea with that is that he could answer those questions. All those questions we might have is like, exactly what does Thermalshock mean? What temperatures, what equipment did you use during that 30-hour dry aerobic? What was happening to the coffee? Was it in steel or whatever it might be? Any questions like that, or general questions you have for Rafael, the producer of these coffees, hopefully we can have those answered. So Nadia and Andre from Southland are going to try and organize that for me. It'd be great to get Rafael on a IGTV. And what we'll do is, before that happens, I'll notify everyone, give everyone a big heads up, but I'll also put into our stories put your questions for Rafael in here. And so we can have a bunch of questions ready for him. And obviously, if you're there live, you can ask him in the comments. But if you're not, you can put your question in beforehand so that he can ask the question and you can look at it after the fact when you do have time. So yeah, that's the idea. Have you thought about sending Rafael a pack of the Hubba Bubba for reference? Oh, of actual Hubba Bubba. No, I haven't, but I should. Unless they have it in Brazil. When I was cupping with Andre and Nadia, they didn't get the same coffee. They didn't get Hubba Bubba, but they got a white, I forgot the name, but a white flower that's native to Brazil, which I think is probably similar to jasmine. Every now and then I do get a jasmine kind of floral musky quality from this, from the 48 that is. So that's what they got instead of Hubba Bubba. But yeah, I think they have had Hubba Bubba. I think once I said it, they got there, but just that wasn't the first thing. Yeah, I have no idea if they have Hubba Bubba in Brazil. If not, we'll have to send Rafael some. So I'm guessing that for him it's probably more tropical and has that kind of white flower, that Brazilian flower thing going on, I suspect, as opposed to Hubba Bubba. If they don't have Hubba Bubba there, I mean they might. This is still pretty hot, but I might start anyway. Yeah, that's not too hot. So they were a little bit hot to touch, but probably the right temperature to start tasting. We're using thicker glass, perhaps that's what's going on. So, for cupping, you're going to see me make a bit of a silly noise. I'm going to tone it down a little bit for the video because people don't really appreciate that. So slurping, people don't really like slurping sounds. The reason we do it when you see weird coffee people doing it is because it aerates the coffee over your palate and that releases more of the volatile aromatics. It helps you taste the coffee better. So what I'm going to do is slurp some of the coffee off my spoon. I'm then going to move it around my mouth. I'm then going to swallow it. You could also spit it out if you've had too much caffeine that day. I'm going to swallow it. I haven't had any coffee today, so this is my score is going to be inflated up because I haven't had any coffee, and caffeine is a drug. And I'm very excited about drinking coffee, so my scores are probably going to be inflated. But swallow it. After you swallow, then I recommend breathing out through your nose. The retronasal gives you something different to what that initial slurp would have. And yeah, I please do let me know if there's better times for me to do this. If you're watching this afterwards on YouTube or Cupwise, because it's really great to do this with more people. I want to do this when it's convenient for you guys, not when it's convenient for me, so we can bounce off each other and you can ask questions and stuff like that. So as I'm moving around my mouth, I'm thinking about taste balance. Taste being, salt, sweet, sour, bitter, umami, not aroma compounds. Is there astringency or not? This is kind of the first one because I'm checking my dial in. Is it sweet? And then do I like the acidity? Is the acidity well balanced? I just realized how much water I've spilled. Sorry, distracted. Is the acidity well balanced? Is there bitterness? Those sort of things. So I'm just thinking about taste. Then I kind of have an initial impression on the aromas on that first slurp, but I kind of then go on to taste. And then on the retronasal, I revisit the aromas. and just get a general idea of the coffee. I'm also checking my dial-in, because if my dial-in was completely off, like how fine or coarse I grind the coffee, if it was completely off, then that's going to very much impact what I taste in the coffees or how I assess the coffees. So it's very important if you were assessing coffees to buy them as a roaster, you don't want to be letting down the green coffee with poor roasting or poor extraction. So you need a bit. That's kind of the things we're usually focusing on when it's QC. Like we've already bought these coffees, we know they're good. That's why we bought them. Now we're just assessing our roast and our extraction. But today we're doing the scripts as well. So I'm actually going on to the 45 from the 15. I haven't put any notes in yet. I'm just getting an initial impression. Yeah, 45 is definitely my favorite so far. Okay, so good thing is my dial-in was quite good. Might be a little bit under-extracted, or I probably could have broken down to the bottom, but that's 2020. So everything's a little bit under-extracted, but that's better than over-extracted, because over-extracted means you're not going to be able to get a lot out of the coffee. First thing for over-extraction is going to be that it's a little bit bland. So, yes. I'm probably going to work on aromas, group descriptors. I keep calling them aromas because aromas, tastes, I separated those things. So again, like I said before, taste just being salty, sweet, sour, those other things being aromas. You could combine them into and call it flavor. Flavor. So I'm going to put those in first because they're the easy ones. And then I'll put in my scores. Again, I'm just going to explain my thinking, explain my working. Hopefully that's useful for you guys. If it's not, if you don't want to be biased, you're watching this after the fact and you don't want to be biased, then how many times have I said that phrase today? After the fact, I have to choose a different one. And you don't want to be biased, then maybe pause it, put your notes in, put your scores in, and then play. So I'm not biasing you. Bias is very powerful. The reason I say this is when you're cupping with other people, bias is very, very powerful. And so that's why etiquette-wise, usually keep it to yourself when you're at a cupping until the very end, and then you share. So I don't think my notes for the 15 have changed much. I'm now getting more pandan than coconut and more cake than hazelnut, but it's still that kind of realm. I've also got in the bag fresh nectarine. I'm not getting that from this roast. I do get it from, yeah, I mean, the acidity is slightly fruity, but it's not, and this kind of goes back down to, it goes to clarity again. So I've got like a fruity acidity, which would remind me of the acidity in like a slightly underripe nectarine or peach. But I'm not getting the aromas of that. So I'm not going to put it in the aroma. I'm just going to think about that when I'm talking about acidity, because I'm not getting those aromas in this roast. Again, this roast we changed, this profile we changed. We went a little bit slower, gentler. And in the newer roast, I do get a kind of stone fruit characteristic, like we did in our initial roasts. But not this one. It's not in this one. I'm not putting it down, even though I know it's there, hopefully there for some of you with different roast dates. Roast dates probably after the 5th of December. So I'm going to go on to the 45. Again, I'm just looking at my aroma compounds, my aroma notes at the moment. So once again, the overripe fruit, it's not funky at all anymore. It's firmly in the overripe fruit, borderline winey category. So I'm really happy about that. I'm not a big fan of funk. Really don't like savory kimchi Vegemite kind of funk. Definitely jammier. The acidity is really nice. It's really working with the fruit. Strawberry, blackberry, licorice still tastes like. Yeah, I don't think I want to change any of those tasting notes. The butter has diminished to the point where I don't notice it at all anymore. But I'm still going to leave that tasting note up. I'm not going to delete it just because I'm not getting that anymore, because it is there in that coffee. I did get it earlier. It's particularly important if it was a defect. You don't want to get, like, if you got some mold defects on the dry, and then by the time you're drinking it, it's not there anymore. You wouldn't delete that from your notes. You wouldn't. It's disappeared. It's definitely still there. You're just not noticing it anymore. So then I'm going to go on to the 48. So the hubba bubba is still there. The marzipan's definitely kicked up. And the marzipan's bigger, and the hazelnuts are almost gone completely for me now. So again, it's a bit annoying that the word cloud is going toasted hazelnuts big, marzipan small, but anyway, it's meant to just be fun. Hubba bubba is still there. I'm actually now, no. Yeah, now I am getting some white flowers. I put jasmine down for that, which I do get sometimes in this. And you can't even see the jasmine in that word cloud. It's a tiny little thing. Okay, all right. That's starting to annoy me. I don't know if I can turn that off or not. I think it's just word cloud or nothing. So anyway, so there's some getting back to the coffee. There's some jasmine that's coming through in that now. Now I've also got on that bag some mango. I'm not getting tropical fruit in this roast, but I have got it previously. Again, I'm not getting it in this cup. I'm not writing it down. Hopefully some of you do get tropical fruits, but it is subtle compared to the Hubba Bubba. The bubble gum is definitely like like big on that. That's the 48. And everyone's watching this and we're like, that sounds delicious. I'll buy some. We've sold out of that. I'm afraid we're about to sell out of the 15 as well. But we are getting more of Rafael's Thermalshock coffees for the next harvest. So he's already done them. They're about to be shipped, etc., etc. We've made our choice. So we've got three different, which we'll probably do an art series again. Thermalshock coffees from Rafael. One which is kind of similar to this again, kind of coconutty, but a bit different. One which is like an amalgamation of these two, like fruity, which I actually prefer because it's got some fruit to go along with the confection. And then one which is completely different to all three of them now. So word cloud is bugged. Yep. So my aromas haven't really changed that much. My group descriptors, my flavor descriptors haven't changed that much. You might notice between the dry and actually tasting it. And that's, I find, normal for me at least. Tasting might change things a little bit. It might turn something to juicy when it wasn't juicy before, or jammy when it wasn't jammy before, or the other direction. But not usually new aroma compounds. The reason I say that is because a lot of people, when they're getting into coffee, if you're watching this and this is the first time you've cupped or something, a lot of people mention that they don't taste in coffee what they smell in it. When they smell the coffee, when they're making it at home, and they taste it, it doesn't taste like how it smelled. If that's the case, there's an issue with your extraction. You know, that's not an issue with you. There's an issue with your extraction, with your burrs potentially, with your water potentially, with over or under extraction. There's something going on there. The aroma compounds won't disappear between you grinding the coffee, and provided you're not grinding it like 3 months in advance, obviously. But when you're making coffee at home, it should taste the way it smells. So yeah, if it's not, then don't blame yourself for not being able, and don't blame the coffee. Blame your extraction or your process for that. So now I'm going to go through again, just going to explain my reasoning and start putting some scores in. For reference frame, again, I was talking about calibration before. 7 is an average coffee. So the reason this scoring just goes from 7 to 10 is because realistically, no one who's using this platform is going to be cupping a coffee which is scoring less than above 7s. So specialty coffee is defined as above 80 points. Anything below 80 points, I'm going to say, has got something wrong with it. Like it's not a pleasant coffee to drink. So I wouldn't go, the way kind of most people seem to be calibrated with coffee is that both the back end of the scale, which for you guys would be that way, I guess, is just not used, right? So it's like no one's really scoring coffees in 5s and 6s and stuff like that. You're just not cupping coffees. I mean, maybe some people are. For the most part, coffees of that low quality are going to be graded. They're going to be scored based on that grading. No one's really going to care about the flavor for those coffees. So this is the specialty coffee assessment. Specialty coffee is only 8 and above, so it should be above 8. And most of the coffees that we buy, I like to have them around the 8.5 mark at least. So that's a frame of reference. 9 would be an exceptional coffee, a 90-point coffee. And you may have heard that term as like top 3 coffees you've ever had in your life, right? It's like exceptional coffee. 80 points is just got by specialty. So you see, most of your scoring ends up being in that kind of 8 to 9 range. I can tell right now, none of these coffees are above a 9, like, and none of them are below an 8 in any of the categories for me, at least, and how I'm calibrated with the people that I've cupped and the calibrations I've done with Aska for judging and whatnot. So these are firmly between 8 and 9, not either side of that. Pretty consistently, yeah. So 8 is like oh yeah, it's okay, it's pretty good, it's a good coffee, it's a specialty coffee. 9 is holy crap, that coffee blew my mind, and 8.5 is that's a really nice coffee. is a really bad way at describing calibration for scoring. But just for a frame of reference, for if you're putting your scores in here, again, you don't have to be calibrated, but I mentioned that because a lot of the time if people don't cup a lot or if they're not calibrated, they see the 7 to 10 scale and they kind of see it like 7 is the lowest it could be, 10 is the, or they see it like they're rating movies or TV shows. And they'd be like, 10 is absolutely outstanding, whereas in this, 9 is outstanding. Nothing is an 100-point coffee. That doesn't exist. And 7 would be, I really enjoyed it. Don't know if I'd watch it again. Whereas that for coffee would be an 8. So just for frame of reference. I'm gonna, after all that spiel out of the way, which is hopefully useful for people, I'm gonna start putting in some scores. The acidity for me on, so I'm doing the lot 15. The acidity for me, for my extraction at least, but what I've got to work with, is probably around like an 8.2. It's nice, it's juicy, it's a little bit sharp, and so the quality of the acidity, the level of acidity is nice, particularly for Brazilian coffee. That's because we've roasted them so lightly, and partly because I deliberately did things lower water. Remember, I only used 25 ppm carbonate hardness to try and bump up the acidity because of the burst set in the oat. But yeah, the acidity is not super crunchy and juicy. It's a little bit sour. Sweetness is good. Sweetness is good. It's maybe a little bit hollow. It's probably a little bit under extracted, but that's what I have to work with. I'm going to put an 8.3 for that. If I bump the extraction up, that acidity, this sweetness would have enhanced the acidity. So both those scores probably would have gone up a little bit. So if I got the extraction better, a little bit higher, then you get a bit more sweetness, and that would improve your perception of the acidity as well. So I'm just tasting in between every one of these scores because I haven't drunk any coffee today. Ordinarily, you'd probably put a lot of these scores in based on one, a couple of tastes, not every single score. I haven't drunk any coffee. The balance, again, because it's a little bit under extracted, and the sourness is a little bit dominant. That's like an 8.2. Oh, we don't have a score for overall in this, do we? So a lot of the time when you're cupping, this cupping sheet doesn't have an overall section. So a lot of the time when you're cupping, you have all these individual ones, and you have a section which is called overall. And that's a good way to kind of even out the scoring to be where the coffee should be. Maybe when you're going through, you're scoring a certain way, and then the average score ends up being like at this stage is going to average out like 8.3. And then I go overall, actually, my gut overall is that coffee is like an 86 point. Right. So it's like that overall score will then pull up those other scores, which are being a little bit lower. We don't have one in this. We don't have an overall section. So actually, I've probably been a little bit harsh on this. Again, 85 as a frame of reference would be like it's 85 would be like I really enjoyed that coffee. And I do really enjoy this coffee. So I'm probably scoring it a little bit too tentatively at the moment. I tend to be a very harsh scorer. I tend to, whenever I'm scoring with other people, even in competitions and stuff, like Asker stuff, I have to round up my scores. I'm always calibrated lower than everyone else, including people with a lot more experience than me. There is score inflation happening a lot of the time these days, but I'm not saying that I'm scoring better. I'm saying I'm scoring worse. I think I'm too far the other direction. Clarity is high. The clarity is high. That's very clearly coconut, pandan, hazelnuts. The roast for me is, is that bit of a toasty thing, but that's not hurting the clarity. It's hurting my overall enjoyment a little bit. That would bring down my overall score if we had one. But it's not muddying the flavor profile at all. That's very clear. So I'm going to go like an 8.6 on that. Yeah, actually, no, an 8.7. That's very clear. And then mouthfeels, not only low because they're very light roast, but also not super. The acidity is creating an under-extracted sour astringency because a bit under-extracted. So I'm going to put that, as like an 8.2. But then my average is then coming out at like 3.2. That's too low for that coffee. That coffee is definitely higher than that. So the aroma I quite enjoyed. I'm going to bump the aroma up there. The acidity, no, that's a bit lacking. The sweetness is probably an 8.5 would be fair for the sweetness. The balance, I've taken a lot of the scores off for the lack of balance in mouthfeel, so I'm probably going to bump balance up a little bit. I think that's so 84.3. Okay, I'm happy with that. I think that's pretty fair for this cup of this coffee. I know that if this was better extracted, if I had brewed this on an EK43 and gotten the extraction better, like we do at the roastery a lot, because we're QCing this, coffee multiple times a week for a few months now, it's easily like an 86 point coffee. But mine today is not, so I'm going to be honest, and put that in as my scoring. I can see some other scores going in for the other one. So Ando, is that you putting in scores? Nice. Haven't assessed numerically before, so this is pretty interesting. I'm glad. Hopefully it's useful. Assessing coffee numerically using a cupping sheet is very useful. A lot of people tend not to do it, even coffee geeks. Baristas a lot of the time don't. I recommend everyone that really wants to get good at analyzing coffee to do so, because it forces you to be analytical and honest. Whereas just going, that's tasty, or that's not tasty. Why would you go, if it's not tasty? Anyway, it doesn't train you to assess coffee very analytically, in my opinion. So I'm going to move on to the 45 now. Hopefully, if this is boring for people and you're watching this later on, obviously you can just skip ahead. But for those that hopefully this is interesting, useful, the acidity is much nicer on the 45. That's easily an 8.8. That is like juicy, crunchy. Oh, and also I didn't change my. Did I change my aroma on that? I did change my aroma. The aroma, I already had it quite high. I'm going to leave it at 8.7. And actually, it's not 8.8 of the acidity. It's probably like, why can't I bring that down? 8.7 for the acidity as well. That's an 87 points. Kind of see that's really juicy, crunchy, quite very pleasant, and the right level. Sweetness is probably an 8.6. It's not crazy sweet. I feel like it could be. This could have been really sweet again if the extraction was a little bit better, the burst set was a little bit better, but maybe not. I don't know that, so I'm going to put what I'm getting in the cup today, which is nice 8.6, I'd say. Definitely better balance than the 15, because that acidity is in better balance. So I'm probably going to put an 8.7 for the balance. Oh no, 8.6 is not that well balanced. Yeah, and we'll see what happens when it cools down. Clarity, it might not get as many points on, I think, this time. Yeah, the flavor is a little bit more muddled on this one. So on the 15, it was very clearly coconut, pandan, hazelnut, like easily delineated. On the 45, I'm just getting this kind of like nutty, jammy, strawberry, but is it black currant? There's a little bit of a licorice, piney thing in there. It's all a bit muddled. It's nice, and it's not just tasting like coffee, and it's not earthy, and it's not unclean, and anything. But the flavors are a little bit muddled, so it's not going to do. I'd say that's probably an 8.4 in clarity for me. I can still pick them out individually, but that's because I do this for a living, I suspect. I suspect that other people may not, people that are just drinking coffee at home, it might just be like sweet and fruity, and maybe not be able to pick out those flavors with as much ease, as much clarity. Their mouthfeel is not going to do as well in the other scores either. Better than the 15. I think the extraction is a little bit higher in this one. So it's a bit more sweet. Doesn't have that sour astringency. I'm going to say probably an 8.3. It's still a little bit hollow in terms of the mouthfeel, not in terms of sweetness, but in terms of the mouthfeel. It's missing something on the mid palate. Yeah, 8.3, which brings us to my average score of 85.9, which I think this cup is. This is an 86 point cup today. And then that also, again, being honest and scoring the cup you're tasting, not what you wish it was or what you know it could be. The 15 being an 84.3 for me, and the 45 being an 85.9. That feels right in terms of enjoyment of this coffee, quality of this cup. 45 being better than the 15 today, the way I'm brewing them. Usually, actually, when I'm cupping them at the roastery, the 15 edges out the 45. But today, that's what we're getting. So, And it's just said after my thing of saying cupping it, cupping numerically, using cupping form is useful to develop those skills. He said he'll be doing it from now on. Excellent. It does improve your enjoyment. Don't do it every single time. You don't just drink coffee as well, but it does improve your ability to enjoy coffee, I feel, as pretentious as that sounds. So on to the 48 now. Okay, so now I've got some acidity there. Now I'm tasting the coffee. I am getting some. The jasmine's more obvious. The hubba bubba's gone down. I am getting some tropical fruit. It's not mango, which I've got written on the bag. What's that? It's papaya. Papaya. Once again, guessing with the spelling. If anyone else gets papaya, please use the same wrong spelling if you get it. So, and that definitely bumps up the aroma for me as well. That's a solid 8.5 for aroma for me. Pretty clearly smack bang in that 8.5. Ordinarily, you wouldn't be changing your aroma score because this isn't an aroma now; it's a flavor. But on this, we don't have flavor. We don't have flavor as a category. So you'd have aroma, and you put your aroma notes in and your aroma score. Then you'd have flavor, and you put your flavor notes in, which might be different, and your flavor score in, which might be different. We're combining the two on this cupping form. So I'm changing my aroma score there. And obviously we've got our combined group descriptors on the bottom as well. I'll bump that up a little bit because personally, I think that's just a personal preference thing. It's a lot less hubba bubba now. A bit of tropical fruit, more jasmine, and I fucking love jasmine and coffee. It's really fun. Now I kind of like it more in a really elitist way when I'd say you could argue is more part of the origin character or the varietal character. In this situation, it's very clearly coming from the fermentation. But how skilled is Raphael with that fermentation to take a coffee which you could probably argue ordinarily wouldn't have jasmine and to have it? Jasmine is very prized in a lot of expensive coffees. So being able to add it through the skill of the producer and not just relying on the varietal, which would be very hard to grow, expensive, potentially can't grow it, etc., etc. That's impressive for me. I like that. So acidity, very similar to the lot 15 in that it's a little bit under extracted, a little bit sharp with the acidity. You're going to go an 8.3 for that. It's nice. It's like underripe fruit again, but it's not crunchy, juicy. It's a little bit sour. Again, probably just a bit under extracted. Sweetness is again a little bit lower. I'd say probably an 8.4 on that one. And again, probably a little bit under extracted. Sweetness is one of those things where obviously it's not sweet like a Coke or actual hubba bubba, but it's sweet for coffee. And I find people kind of start with that. They do a bit better with free association, and then once they're getting a bit more used to grading sweetness in coffees, then thinking about what it reminds you of is same thing with acidity. Thinking about what it reminds you of is probably more effective. So like something if it was really high quality acidity and really sweet would be jammy, right? Because jam has some nice acidity, but not too much. It's not sour. It has really sweet. Like eating some jam, right? Really high sweetness and lower acidity would be something very confectionery. And then lower sweetness and higher acidity might be kind of like this, where it's a little bit sour. It kind of reminds you of eating underripe fruit. If you were separating out sourness from sweetness and you just want to look at sweetness and what you're associating with, might be the difference between like the types of sugar. So some people would say like, oh, it's like a fruit sweetness as opposed to like a raw sugar kind of sweetness or a honey syrupy sweetness. So finding those associations will be really useful. You'll find acidity and sweetness are very, very in tune with each other a lot of the time, mainly because sweetness affects your perception of acidity, not perception, your preference for the acidity. So I think similar to the lot 15 balance is going to be not amazing with the balance. Again, because it's a little bit under extracted. I think that's probably an 8.3. Clarity, I think this is going to be similar to the 15, more so than the 45. Yeah, very good clarity. Not quite as good as the. Actually, let me go back. It's always and go back and forth. I'm going to go back to the 15, which I haven't been doing as of yet. Go back and forth because that comparative tasting will highlight things differently for you. Clarity's a little bit lower than the 15. So I'm going to go like, yeah, I reckon an 8.5 for the clarity on that. It's quite clear. I'm not struggling to pick things out. But when you go to the 15, you're like, whoa, okay, that stuff's just jumping out at me. Very clear. And mouthfeel is probably about the same. It's probably like an 8 point, maybe a little bit better. I think not because the extraction is better, but just because it's a honey process, the acidity is a little bit more in check. So I'm going to say that mouthfeel is, yeah, it's probably an 8.4. And actually, balance is probably an 8.4 as well. And yeah, so that gets me to 84 points for that cup, for that coffee. I'd say that's probably a little bit low, but it's definitely like a higher scoring cup than the 15, which we've got at 84.3. Which actually, going back to it now, I feel like that should be a little bit higher. That's probably an 85. But I think if I look at my scoring here, mouthfeel, that's pretty accurate. Clarity, they're all pretty accurate. I think what's happening is aroma at 8.5, because this coffee, a lot of what was bringing to the table is that really intense, really fun aroma. And 8.5, because my personal preference, not really being for that confected thing, is probably bringing that down unfairly for that coffee. So I say that's probably like an 8.7. That's probably an 8.7. And then same thing with the sweetness. I'm being very clinical with my assessment of the sweetness, but a lot of people, because of those confected flavors, the confected aromas, that probably bump up the cup as well. And so that's probably an 8.5. And that gets us to 84.6, around 85. Yeah, that feels about right for this coffee today. Again, similar to the 15, I know that with a better extraction, with a better burst and stuff, that's easily an 86 point coffee. But it's not today. It's an 84.6 coffee. Well, okay, and also I'm saying like 0.3, 0.9, 0.6. That's because the math is being done for me automatically by the spreadsheet, by the app, by Cupwise. Fantastic app. Ordinarily, I'd be going to 0.25s, not going 0.3. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be going to 0.1 accuracy. I'd be going to 0.25 accuracy. Claiming that something is 84.3, not 84.4, is pretentious and ridiculous. You don't need to be that. You'd go to 0.25. And honestly, if you're just cupping at home, then just go to, like half point differences, 84.5 versus 84 maybe. Yeah, it's a little bit, this is a little bit, that was 48, a little bit of balance. Again, aromas haven't really changed other than that initial thing I mentioned about the jasmine and the tropical fruit, but as they're cooling, yeah, the sweetness is 85, 8.5 for the sweetness that was the 15. Yeah, I'd say that's about accurate. Yeah, no, that scoring is probably fine. I'd say the balance, the balance on the, just again, that cupping comparatively helps a little bit. Balance on the 48 is probably a little bit higher than the 15, so I can put that up to 8.5. Ordinarily, you wouldn't do that. Ordinarily, you would score coffees at the same time. You're scoring coffees at the same time, but you would score them based on themselves, not based on what else is on the table. You would score them based on what those scores should be in your head, based on reference. But I'm trying to do this scoring in a way that when people come and have a look at this afterwards, you guys get an idea of what quality those cups are, what quality those scores are. So I want to compare them to each other so that you guys can taste the difference between an 83 and an 85 in terms of like an 8.5 and an 8.3. So that's why I'm doing that. It's a bad habit, you wouldn't want to do it ordinarily. I'm just saying that's the reason I'm doing it today, because I actually want to create a reference frame amongst these three coffees for you guys playing at home. But yeah, don't do that ordinarily. As it's cooling down, the 45, that was 45 I just had. As it's cooling down, that funkiness is starting to come through again. Not in an unpleasant way. It's not savory at all. It's definitely firmly in the overripe fruit. And I'm putting the funkiness alongside that licorice quality. I think it's fine. I think it's within the realm of this is actually quite nice, and the overripeness, the funky little bit of funkiness which is there, is just enhancing the jamminess of it. So we're going to deduct points from it for that. But yeah, if someone really didn't like any funk at all, then that might put them off. And if you really did like, jammy, overripe, winey, funky coffees, then you'd probably score it higher than I have, because you like that in a coffee. But I liked it before when it was a little bit warmer and it was just juicy and fruity. But also, there might be comparative tasting. It might be because now I'm coming at it kind of on its own, whereas before I came at it right after the 15, that might have affected my perception. I doubt it in this situation because the 15 is completely clean, no funkiness at all. So it wouldn't hide the funkiness in the 45. It would accentuate it, if anything. But it's really nice. These are kind of cold now, but after I turn this off, I'm going to drink these and enjoy drinking them because I still haven't really had that much coffee. This is had like this much out of each cup. And jasmine is the fucking best. Yeah, no, I love jasmine in a coffee. Some people really don't because they find it's too perfumey, it's too like perfumed, and that kind of throws them off a little bit. I quite like it in coffees, but yeah, so they're wrong. Yeah, well, yeah, you can say that. I'm not going to say that. I have to be Switzerland, but yeah, you can say that. We've got some other scores in here, so that's awesome. Thank you. If because we didn't get many people live now, obviously it wasn't a great time for everyone, or I didn't advertise it very well. I apologize for that. If you're annoyed that you missed out on doing it live because I suck at marketing things and talking about things, or choosing what time to do things, I apologize. Let me know when's a better time to do these kind of things in the future. We're going to keep doing these. That's the idea. You can watch this on YouTube after the fact if you just want to taste the coffees alongside. You don't have to cup them either. Like we're doing a cupping, but you don't have to cup them. You can make yourself a pour over whatever, a long black, and just sit there and drink it whilst watching the video if that's interesting. Great. If you do want to cup them and add your own scores in and your own taste descriptors, please do. I'm going to leave the scoring open on Cupwise. So again, if you're on YouTube, follow the link to get to Cupwise. That's where you can put in your scores. So I'll end the session. Hopefully that won't lock the scoring. Instead, it will show the average scores, show the group descriptors. Even if you're doing this a month after now, right now it's the 7th of January, you're doing this in February or something, because you've still got the coffee, or you put it in the freezer, whatever, please feel free to put those descriptors in. Because if nothing else, it's really useful for us on determining our tasting notes for future coffees. And also I can pass that on to Rafael. I can pass on to Rafael not just what we thought of the coffee, but what other people thought of the coffees. That's one of the benefits for this. I figure these things are fun for you guys, maybe educational. Fingers crossed, I do like educating. But I don't like forcing it on people. Hopefully fun, if nothing else, but also useful for us to get feedback, and that feedback for us, and also to pass that feedback on to the producer. So yeah, it'd be great if you guys can throw in some. Again, if you don't cup it, don't worry about putting scores in. If you don't want to put scores in, that's just a bit too technical. Whatever, no stress. But throwing in some group descriptors would be great. And yeah, I'll try and watch the YouTube, check out the YouTube every now and then, see if anyone throws any comments on it there about better days for doing these things or any questions you have. Same thing with Cupwise. I'll put in my to-do list to check this in a couple of weeks to see if there's any comments for me to respond to, but don't rely on it. If you have any specific things you want to talk to me about, then DM on social media or email us, and I'll get either of those. Because I may forget to come back to these web pages and check the comments and stuff. YouTube is probably better because I think YouTube will send me an email if someone leaves a comment. So yeah, that's probably safe. If you want to tell me days and times that are better for this, or you have questions, maybe YouTube comments should be pretty safe. Cupwise, maybe not so much. Ando said, "We'll update my scores and descriptors as the coffee develops." Thank you, Ando. And yes, that's how you usually go about it. Usually, you'll find you might score a coffee a little bit low, and then as it develops, you bring it up, or you score it a little bit high, and as it develops, you bring it back down again. But yeah, doing multiple passes is always handy. And seeing as I don't really think any questions here right now live, I'm probably going to sign off, say thank you to anyone that joined us live, thanks, Ando. And Ash, briefly. Good luck with the kids, Ash. And if you're watching this later on, if you're watching this after we've done it, then yes, thank you for watching it. If you do go into Cupwise and throw in some group scripters, really appreciate it. And yeah, let me know if there's better times, days for doing these kind of things, or more notification from me leading up to it. Sorry, I apologize. Yeah, because we're going to keep doing them, and hopefully we can make them really fun, back and forth kind of thing, and not just me talking at you guys. Because yeah, I'm not a YouTuber, I'm a coffee roaster, and we get kind of lonely roasting coffee. We like having conversations about coffee, not just pontificating about it. Anyway, hopefully it was fun and interesting, and I'm going to work out how to end the live stream now. Thanks, everyone. Oh, and I don't think I introduced myself. I'm Adam, if that's at all interesting or relevant. Thank you. Bye-bye. End stream.